Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and good evening for those of you in distant places. Um, Sustainability is one of these subjects which it really ignites passions. It imbues people with a lot of kind of ideas about what they should be looking at, and everybody kind of thinks about it in terms relatively um, either benign terms about, well, my business can't do that because of this, or they present barriers into the way they think about the challenges of sustainability. But it is becoming, I think, we have moved from the world of correction or do no harm or that kind of thing to the world of the future, which is very much about how do we actually positively impact the planet? How do we positively impact society with the actions that we're ultimately putting into place around our businesses? So the traditional business models, which unfortunately still tend to dominate the literature, the textbooks, the things like that, are very linear in their life cycle thinking. They're very much along the lines of extraction of whether it's virgin goods or whether it's mining things or whatever, and the extraction, the use, and the disposal. And that disposal element of it normally ends up in landfill. It normally ends up in some horrendous kind of wasteful way, and then gets shipped from one country to another, and it becomes toxic. And it is really, at the end of it all, a very damaging process. And I think that there are a lot of organizations now that are approaching sustainability in a much more vigorous way, in a much more engaging way, where they take that cycle and they start looking at, or that linear aspect, and start looking at circularity, how we can repurpose what's at the end of life. How can we build something sustainable into our business model, whereby we can either repurpose what we're disposing and use it for another means, or alternatively, we can recycle it and put it back in so that it becomes not lesser, but actually augments what ultimately people are doing. And that use and those values fit very well with the new, if it's not new, but with a much clearer kind of idea about how we use resources really effectively. So resource-driven businesses, that idea that what we've got at the back of us is driving what we're going to be providing at the front, is a really crucial kind of part of that thinking. And I think that it's becoming more and more of an issue, certainly within Europe, certainly within that kind of idea. Certainly within Europe, there are large, copious amounts now of funding and initiatives that are all basically heading towards that. How do we create something which is more sustainable, more longer lasting? And I think that innovation process, that new novelty and the newness, is becoming more and more about how do we embed some aspect, some purposeful aspect into what we do. And I just genuinely, I think that businesses more and more are becoming so aware of the impact, the footprint that they are going to be making on society. And it's also economically a really smart thing to do, because if we're actually reusing and repurposing things, um, then ultimately what we're doing is we're reducing the cost of that input, and therefore our businesses will run more efficiently and more effectively, and they will end up by creating this level of purposefulness within them. So yeah, so that's what it is. So I think the general, I think it'd be good at this particular point. And I have to kind of acknowledge to Gabriella, because one of the examples I'm going to refer to is the Rubis in the that you introduced me to, that particular business. We're going to look at that a little bit more going forward. So I should say to Gabriella, thank you very much for introducing that case study to us, because I think it's a really interesting concept about how we do this. But if you take an organization like Apple, how do you think they manage their kind of sustainability footprint? And the other aspect of it, if you look at something like from a social impact perspective, not just from an environmental impact, But say somebody think like the news is full of Arcadia closing down and jobs going. What are we doing as a society to sustain that level um, of use and usability of people's experiences, of their skills, of reorganization of society? The problem in a way that exists with the capitalist models that we have at the moment is that we dispose of things, and we never, that disposal process is an abdication of the cost. And inevitably within society, what we need to be thinking about, actually, how do we reuse people, their skills, and how do we augment them? And we do that whether we're talking about an asset or a piece of capital, like something tangible, like a lump of metal, or we're talking about people's lives. And I think that that's where the sustainability and that circularity argument are going to become more and more relevant as business develops. So let's just have a kind of a brief chat, a brief discussion about how we transform potentially the linear stuff around what we're doing into something which is ultimately more sustainable, more circular, and where that might take us within the businesses. So perhaps if what would be a good idea, if you could just talk a little bit about where you're coming from within your business. So I'm going to open it up on the floor, and if you could just tell us a little bit about where you are, and then pose yourself the challenge about how do I'm sure because you're here, you're thinking about sustainability, but how do I make the business more sustainable? The idea, the concept. So perhaps if we can do it, because it's a small group, so let's just kind of give ourselves 5-10 minutes, just a minute to introduce yourself, an outline of that business and the challenge of sustainability that you're looking at within the business. So let's go. Yeah.
Before we call on anyone, James, I'm just going to sort of say, so Camilla's asked, actually, is it the same as the circular economy?
Yeah, the circular economy at the end of the day is a representation of that sustainability. How we ultimately take this linear process and reimagine it into a circular process. And I think that that's where if you, just as a guide, if you want to go off and research more about this, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation are a phenomenal resource to have in your back pocket when it comes to looking at sustainability. They do an awful lot about it in terms of education, in terms of the universities, the MBAs and everything like that. They are very supportive of this because it's something that they're going to get to. So yeah, so let's just have a quick brief, introduce yourself, and then just literally 1 minute just to talk a little bit about how you're addressing sustainability within your business. Start with Ron.
All right. So yeah, is it Ron Ewan?
Yeah. Do you want to unmute yourself, Ron?
Yes. Sorry. As for me, I think sustainability in the business should be people's thoughts about prevent wastes and avoid like something damage the environment. Like I'm from China, and I know that currently in China, some of the business they suggest the employees to turn off the lights and save some resources like paper or other things, and reduce the uses of the disposable, like the disposable chopsticks and some forks like that.
I think that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you take a picture from the air over a city across the world, even at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it is a bright light of it's just saying that there is all this light pollution and stuff going out, and it's all that energy that we're absorbing. And it's ultimately just simple things like turning things off that make a real big difference. And if they could do that more and more within businesses and the like, you would think that there would be better mechanisms to actually control the amount of energy that they use.
Yeah,
I can't remember who it is though. There was a company a few years ago that I found who essentially were installing basically one massive power off button. So when the last person was almost kind of leaving the office, it's typically built for the kind of skyscrapers in London, that the last person out of the office would always kind of push this button. So rather than have to go around and check everyone's individually, it was almost just kind of this one big off switch. So again, it's kind of how do you affect kind of individual change, and kind of how do you affect kind of much bigger change as well?
Okay, so going on, so Gabriella, what about you? Frozen, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, what about you?
Sorry.
What's your approach?
Sure. So I found it very difficult to I guess come to a full circle, right? Like in this circular model. I feel like coming to these workshops and having had a few of the one-to-ones has helped me kind of fill in more of the circle. So I've had the opportunity to live in, you know, in the US, in Central America, and in South America. And so to me, also another challenge is the mindset about this, right? Because in the US, and you know, even now learning a little bit more about the UK, even though I'm not there yet, there is this, you know, this want and need to move towards this more sustainability, right? But in Latin American countries, unfortunately, it's still like, it's a challenge, right? Because their mindset is not there yet of companies wanting to invest in the more sustainable matters, right? So it's like, that's another thing that I'm thinking about as well, in terms of, you know, expansion. It's like, okay, first it's like having to get these companies to buy into this model, because it's not the first thing that they think about, right? It's still all about the company wanting to, you know, just obviously make money and do their thing, as opposed to wanting to give back socially and have a great social impact.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that the challenge, like you say, is that certain societies don't, they look at maybe the large consuming societies like the US and to a degree UK, Europe, and all of that, the developed countries that are consuming all of these things, and we're trying very hard as a society to adopt ourselves to this more sustainable concept, and we kind of expect other people to be doing the same. But in reality, it isn't a level playing field. It isn't something at the end of it all that people can actually align themselves to. It should be easier for the developed countries to make the transition and the shift, but it's inevitably it's that kind of, how do we do it globally? How do we actually make an impact on this? Because one person or one country can't do this alone. It's not like borders pay homage to toxicity. It doesn't happen, does it? So we're imbued in a pandemic that crosses borders, nations, has no kind of boundaries, and ultimately what we're asking ourselves is globally to fix a problem, and yet probably politically there aren't that many mechanisms for that really to truly come together and happen. So it is a big challenge, but I don't think it should stop us constantly looking to do our bit within that process and within what we're ultimately trying to do. And if you've got a voice and a vote and a kind of an ambition, then I think it's a really powerful thing to be actually showing people the way to actually achieve something. And I think economically, I still think it makes sense, and I just don't think people recognize it from an economic perspective. I think it really does make sense, whether people think about it or not, like that. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Gabriel. Krishna?
Yeah, I'm looking at a bit different here with a tangent. I'm looking at how we can save energy in the human system from a psychological point of view, because stress, anxiety, that kind of burns energy, even cognitive load, thinking, not able to understand certain things, learning, whether it's a student or even at work. So reducing the cognitive load, or how best we can look at getting into a state of flow, which also saves a lot of energy, psychologically speaking, and the importance of rest and sleep in human energy mechanism, how it is spent and how it is saved and used. So I'm looking at habits because that's what I've specialized in my master's. I'm looking at how habits and flow can be combined in what I'm thinking to save energy and be more sustainable and how to make that as a social enterprise if possible.
Yeah, that's a challenge and a half, isn't it? First and foremost, I love it because I'm an advocate for the whole of the kind of how we as humans extend that kind of our usefulness of life. We are being asked to extend it. Economically, we're being asked to extend it. We're told we're longer than we've done before. Therefore, we should be thinking about how do we extend our usefulness in that respect without damaging ourselves mentally in that process. And I think that there is there are huge challenges in that front, and I do think it is a sustainability issue. I think our mindset on sustainability is very focused upon product and product kind of areas, and yet in reality the biggest capital that we waste is human capital. And I think that if we can find mechanisms to be able to actually extend that life and make it more valuable to not just to the people who live it, but for those people that is coming through the process, I think that's a really big challenge, but it's well worth pursuing in a lot of respects. But I mean, presumably you're very focused on what is it, Daniel Kahneman and his thinking fast, thinking slow mindsets and being in the flow of work and that kind of thing. Those things driving you, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
I wish you luck. It's a
Thank
big
you.
task, but it's it's absolutely, and how we put it into a social enterprise. We'll come on to a bit about social enterprises and why and how they exist and what they are. Okay, cool. So Camilla, do you want to talk, and you guys?
Sure.
Okay.
And in our case, we are looking at,
Am I
sorry
frozen?
for the background sound sometimes. We are looking at sustainability in the way of society's development, since we are looking to tackle a very specific barrier that is nowadays not allowing many people with low resources to improve their life conditions. So we really want to provide this in order to generate a cycle, to stop a cycle that is nowadays in the society, where because they don't have the languages skill to get a better job, to get better education in different countries, to travel, to get a different perspective, they continue, they are like forced to remain in the same place with the same social status and the same barriers they were born in. So that's what we really want to tackle.
Again, that's a very it's a massive challenge, isn't it? I mean, are you looking at this from a geographic perspective? Or are you looking at it from is there an area that you're working on this specifically at the moment, or looking to work on it?
We are starting in 2 specific areas, but we really want to do it bigger.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, and there's definitely a big need. So whereabouts are you starting at the moment?
We are starting in our country, in Chile, and we are targeting China, which are 2, Chile first because we really know the context in there and the problems they have, and China because we have really good connections there, and we have noticed that the same problem we have back in our country is there. And we didn't ever imagine about the problem with the English in this case.
For example, in the uni.
For example, at university, we saw that.
Okay, that's fascinating. So again, another huge kind of challenge, and I think that the good thing again is it's coming back to being, it's about people. It's about extending and making people feel a part of this as a big kind of global family, and I think that's again. We talk about it very kind of wistfully and a bit sort of kind of esoteric. The reality of it is it matters so much, because I think that what's happened with, say, for instance, through COVID, I think it has fundamentally changed, the way that the world will be perceived and the way that we will perceive the world. And I think those ramifications will flow through through society and through the economy for years to come. And I don't think this is, regardless of whether we get a vaccine or not, that's not the point. The point is that it's awakened us to how interdependent we are and how connected we are as a world. And I think that's something that we need to really grab hold of and see what we can do. Yeah, great, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who next? Who wants to go next? Okay, go on, Abel. Yep.
Yeah, my name's Abel, and my idea centers around fashion and clothes, essentially creating a marketplace for sustainable clothing that also operates as an upcycle market where customers can then send in their clothes to be upcycled by these designers. But it's centered around the idea of supporting these emerging independent designers through like logistics and essentially like what they would go to a consultant, what the general issues they would have essentially growing their business, especially in this time where no one has the money to be able to pay for one to essentially grow their initial business. And there's been a trend essentially, and the issues I would have is essentially trying to incorporate an intuitive model. So the website and the interface is both one where people can engage with when they're first time trying to be more sustainable, that isn't too essentially complicated. So,
yeah. So how are you thinking about that as a challenge in terms of, are you thinking of it as a platform? Are you thinking this as an educational program, or
I think initially more of a platform that would, a platform that is essentially two-dimensional from a consumer standpoint, but from a designer standpoint, it's also double-faceted or triple, because they can both sell their merchandise and also learn and support themselves, or learn some of the fundamental basics that they might not otherwise know if they didn't go to fashion design college, essentially, the criteria and modules and areas, especially, and areas you wouldn't otherwise know, whilst also being able to sustain themselves if they're not selling their products via upcycling and fixing other people's products and prolonging the life cycle of that, essentially.
And I think that we are becoming as a society more aware of fashion and what it does, and the good things as well as the bad things about it. And I think that's very easy to kind of knock fashion on the head and say it's a massively toxic thing to be involved with. But the bottom line of it is that we can do it better. We just need to get the system right. And I think the supply chain is a big challenge for that, because again, we've got that whole kind of concept of we can look at our supply chain and we can go back maybe one or two steps, but there is a real vulnerability in that supply chain. And I think for a lot of small businesses, they find it very difficult to stay connected to the supply chain. They may be that they want to be sustainable, maybe they want to do something, but they don't know how to integrate the supply chain into their business models. And I think there are lots, and I love new technologies to solve this particular problem. So blockchain and things like that. These are things at the end of the day that could actually make a significant difference to the way the supply chains and the way that people are rewarded and the kind of the global community can come together. So yeah, so it's really, again, another great, yeah, love it. So it's another fascinating subject. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Abel. Okay. Catherine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, the problem of waste is the problem based on a spiritual and ethical, vertically based issue around the world. What I mean by that is that if I train my family to make sure that the waste goes in the right places, if the governments block those companies who are trying to tick boxes and produce things that are totally useless in terms of waste, then that's where we stand, that's where we want to be. If the social media, if everyone, vertically based solution, which is also backing up spiritual and ethical aspect of the waste, I think that's where the problem is. All this fashionable clothing that are not ethical, and then the other problem is plastic. How do we contain liquid from internal and external interaction, for example, disease prevention, and also containing water and liquid? Plastic is an issue. We used to use skin, animal skin to contain liquid, but since then we've moved on, and we've not been able to find a replacement for plastic, and that's going to continue, in my opinion, until we find a proper solution for plastic.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's an area of so I've probably frozen again, my internet rubbish, but there's an area of you got it? Am I there? Am I talking? Okay, fine. There's an area of being sort of kind of aware that we have within those sort of areas like the plastic stuff that we either treat it as substitution or removal. Which end of that spectrum do we want to kind of utilize it? I mean, there is again massive challenges because there are inroads being made into a lot of the area. Substitution is, like you say, nothing works as well as plastic, but at the other end of that, you've got from the point of view of nothing works as well as plastic, but what you've also got is plastic that could be disposed. So there's that kind of recycling process, that kind of area of that. But I do agree that it from a point of view of a model of how we stop that overconsumption, how we stop that kind of just that vertical chain of activity. Yeah, you know, I mean, these are areas that we are as a society addressing, but we're not doing it probably quick enough. So I think there are challenges there as well.
But also, I think the other two issues that I'm thinking of is nuclear waste, which I got to become familiar with when I was 18, 19 years old, when we went to Sizewell to have a visit, and they told us that what they do with nuclear waste. And I was thinking, oh my God, that can't be possible. And thirdly, lastly, is that, for example, these big platforms that are selling Chinese products, all sorts of products that are not sustainable, recyclable, or any form of use. I think these platforms, I've been looking, I mean, I don't know where to go to actually find a group of people who join me and think about setting up an equivalence to Amazon that actually extract all the products from all different suppliers which are sustainable and just filter them out and don't allow any other product that is not sustainable, not recyclable, to actually enter the platform. And that's where we stand. I mean, I would be my own customer if I was to extract, from all these big companies who supply to us on the internet and filter and don't allow them to put the products that are not sustainable, then I would be my own customer. I would go to that website, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, Amazon for the green person. I guess that, yes, I mean, why not? I mean, it's there, isn't it? I mean, it can be done. I mean, there's no reason why it can't be done in that respect. I mean, it's a big challenge once more, but it is there. I think that's the thing out of all of this is that whatever we do to make an impact, we have to think about scale. We have to think about things at a bigger level. The capacity needs to be done, but we need to start at the other end of the spectrum as well. So I think that there is that kind of, where do we start? Where do we build? Where do we want to get to? Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Let's just move on. We're running a little bit behind time, but I want to hear from everybody. So Hadel, do you want to speak?
Hi. So similar to what Camilla was saying, I guess my approach in this aspect would be not based on product, but more like a service that focuses on social integration for queer folks in the UK, especially for refugees and asylum seekers.
Okay.
So that would be, I'm not sure, like, that's pretty much why I'm here, because I want to see where does this fit in, basically, in the SDGs. Sorry about that.
That's right. The question about where it fits in, it's a human challenge. It's a human-centered challenge that we understand from our perspective that the refugee crisis isn't going to go away as well. And whilst economic inequalities exist and where strife and war exists, there will be a flow of people from one area to another. But I think that as a moral imperative, we have to address that issue. We have to understand the impact that it has on our society, and it has to be how do we, how do we integrate? How do we make people feel a part of something? And I think there is, what we don't want to do is we don't want to create areas where where people are kind of separate and there's ghettos and things like that. You need that environment of integration in order for people to actually can feel like they're contributing and being a part of something. So again, it's a big challenge, but there are bodies out there, whether it's in the charity sector, whether it's in the third, well, certainly across most of the third sector, that deals with that kind of area. There are lots of ways of doing it. It's just finding which way is the right way for you to be able to actually make something happen within that spectrum. But yeah, great. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so Danny, are you last? I think you might be last, actually.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had this problem with my internet connection, so I couldn't listen to most of the conversation.
That's okay. But you understand, just very briefly, what area of social impact are you focused upon?
Actually, I can tell you what I do right now. So if we can see together which aspect of the social gets into my or fits into my business. So I work in a company that provide courses and training for people that want to use drones in a professional way. So for example, firefighters departments or agriculture, small agriculturals, or companies that want to use drones to make some solar inspection in solar panels or to inspect energy towers. And we provide this kind of training in order to those companies to do these kind of jobs in an easier way and in a safer way. So what we have developed right now is some kind of scholarships. So for people that want to use drones, but that doesn't necessarily has the money to access to those kind of trainings. But I don't know if that is social or that is like something related with social responsibility, but not with having a social business. So that's why I really wanted to understand what a social business means and a sustainable business means and how to implement that into my company.
Okay, so today, again, an interesting challenge. I think that the bottom line of any of this sort of thinking is that business doesn't work in a vacuum. It works completely in within its environment, within the society, what it's doing. So within that environment, there is certainly from the point of view of training people, there are clearly ethical things that you could be training them about and how to use the technology in an ethical way as opposed to in a non-ethical way. So there's that kind of level of social impact potentially that fits within it. So ethics is a big area of social outcome. There is also areas of how that drone technology and how it's being used potentially to help people in very remote environments. So not just simply commercial sides for the farmers and that but the commercial side of any business can be always used to supplement the non-commercial aspect of what people are doing. So any social driven model, right, is always looking potentially of exploiting a revenue stream to deliver back some impact that would otherwise go unfunded. And if you can do that through a sustainable business model and a sustainable revenue stream in a commercial way, it alleviates the need to go out and get grants or go out and get funding or go out and do that. You can do it from that perspective. So if you're building something which has a commercial output, but at the end of the day has a social impact, whether it's to support people in rural economies, rural areas, maybe that feel they're vulnerable to being ill, that they can't get medicines. There's loads of different good stuff that gets delivered by drones and sorted out, right? It's not just the future is Amazon parcels, that's fine. And that technology would exist and there's a commercial end to it. And that's good because it takes traffic off our roads and does all of that. But if that engine is driving something at the back that says, but actually we can support people in the middle of Africa or rural country or rural economies in the middle of wherever and get them medicines without the risk of losing them. They just literally can be dropped off. All of that's really good, sustainable stuff. So whatever business we create, if we want to make an impact beyond the environment that we're working, then what we do is we're building sustainable business models to drive the social impact within the business. But yeah, again, brilliant. Okay, all right, cool. So Andy, do you want to add anything?
No, just a few small challenges for this afternoon. Nothing we can't tackle, I don't think, as a big group. But I think, no, the breadth of the ideas, I think just individually address so many aspects of the challenges that we face as society. And I say society as a kind of a global term as well. These will all have an application to different parts of the world where the economy, education, equality, all of these are at different stages of progression. And I think there's ways that actually, these types of ideas need to become more popular. I hate to sort of say it, but there's a saying from a film which is kind of greed is good, and it's called Wall Street. But I think actually the mentality's gone full circle, and I don't want to bring this up. You often hear these words, millennials and kind of snowflakes, things like that. I actually just think it's a thought shifting process. And I think that's where we've gone as a society. I think we've moved away from that old style industrialism, and we're now more in kind of this revolutionary phase, which is actually, we built the world up and people got left behind. And now we want to bring people back so we're more even than we ever have been before. And I just think the range of ideas and everything we've just heard is just absolutely a fantastic way to start addressing some of these challenges. So I think there's some really, really plausible and applaudable ideas that you've just kind of spoke through. So first of all, I think it's just a case of saying well done for looking at these aspects.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to move on very quickly. What I'm going to do in the chat box is I'm just going to post a link to what is called the I can't pronounce it, James, you might. GlobeScan Sustainability Leaders Report. It is I think it's about a 30 or 40 page document. We're not going to ask you to read it, but just really quickly, almost just spend like 10, 15 seconds on each page. Look for a few things that stand out to you. And we're just going to ask you all to kind of talk through one thing that actually comes up in this report. So I'm just going to pop this into the chat box. So yeah, if everyone can just take a couple minutes, there's a PDF document on that link. It's the full report. Just have a quick look at it, and we're just going to really quick round robin when you come back. Just ask everyone to pick out the one thing that they really kind of identify or associate with this report. So don't read it in detail. Just have a really quick look and let us know what stands out to you. All right. I don't think anyone's going to have enough time really kind of without wanting to read the whole thing. But did anyone kind of, hopefully you all picked up on one or kind of maybe two things there which really stand out. I mean, for me, I'm just looking, I think it's page 10. They've got the graph in terms of perception change as to where the focus needs to be in key areas. And when you look at most of them, kind of these are ranked by experts in terms of where they were ranked in terms of urgency requirement, in terms of attention and focus needing to be spent. When you look at most of them, they tend to sort of change anywhere between 2 points and 6 points. And I think unsurprisingly, in the current environment, access to medicines and healthcare increases by 12%, and infectious disease increases by 16%. So I think kind of it's important to recognize in the current environment that we can sometimes be blinded by the immediate things that are happening around us. But one of the things unrelated to this report that I read earlier this week is that they think just the impact of COVID on its own could potentially set back gender equality in the UK by 25 years. So less than 10 months of disruption in business could have a 25-year impact on us reaching gender equality in terms of the number of women or kind of BAME minorities in maybe kind of leadership roles in different areas, pay equality, all of these aspects. So if we think about that in terms of a period of time of disruption and the impact, it's about looking at how actually that is a kind of really concerning and an alarming impact in that particular area. So anyone else got anything there that they kind of picked up on that they'd sort of like to share? You can put your hand up or unmute yourselves, please do.
That's really interesting that, for example, the more like some of the most well-known companies are listed here. So for example, Unilever and Microsoft and Patagonia and all of that, they get listed and in the first places. So that makes me feel like at least we are getting at the point of making that sustainable threats something important for everyone. So that's my highlight.
Yeah. Thank you, Danny. I think Abel, I think you'd gone to sort of unmute yourself as well.
The bit I noticed, or I took notice on, was on page 16, where I was looking at like businesses that were essentially the most sustainable. I said IKEA was in there, and I was thinking in regards to how they're also one of the main suppliers. And I read an article recently. Well, it's like how they contribute so much to this, but at the same time they perpetuate the waste through the quality of the products they produce, and they also recycle. They have a cyclical model, but they're also benefiting from it in a kind of greenwashing way, where it might seem beneficial, but it's actually not helping the actual fundamental source of the problem, which is the durability of the products and goods that are being manufactured. So there's generally best ways.
For me, I think that's one of the interesting things is that the companies like, certainly not Patagonia, who have had a sustainability track record for a number of years, but Unilever being top of the sustainability chart, and that's where they've literally been for the last 10 years. That stemmed from a CEO who literally just said, no, that's where we're going to be, but they don't play on it. They don't put it out there as much as you'd think that they would do. They're still a major brand supplier, but they don't talk about their sustainability track record particularly loudly, which I find kind of bizarre, because having been a sustainability leader, why wouldn't they be wearing that banner that much broader on their chest? I don't get that. So that's, for me, was an interesting sort of kind of perception or misperception. IKEA is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it, again, like you said, that kind of sustainability recycling bit, and they are doing more in that sort of kind of zone. And I think if you go into the report, you get to understand a lot more about the questions they're asking and about the future and the kind of where they're at. So they're obviously clearly making massive sort of kind of inroads into their business models to actually do this. And that's, again, one of the things that I picked up on was how important the business models of the future will be based on sustainability. So I think that's again a big challenge.
Yeah, I think we've got Krishna's raised his hand, and I think Camilla went to kind of unmute herself. So we'll go to Krishna first, and we'll come to Camilla.
Yeah, very quickly, I thought this pandemic is like a reset button on collective consciousness, because somewhere in the report I saw the sustainability going across the sector, apart from pharmaceuticals and health, and inequality. It cuts across NGOs, all sorts of. There was another graph, I forget which page it was, which says it was not just the government, but literally everybody's on it. And I saw Tata to L'Oreal. So from mass production, industrial to cosmetics, I think everybody is getting involved in having a relook at, what's the best foot forward we should be putting in terms of growth at what cost. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think I think that idea of it being COVID being a reset button for a lot of the global economy, I think is very true, because there is this, for me, this perception that things will return to some form of what they were before. And I don't think we're going to be allowed to do that. I don't think the globe is going to allow ourselves to go quite back into where we were. So there will be massive challenges based around that. And that some of that can be very positive in terms of the way that you can live. I'm just hoping that that's going to be the case. But I think that we just have to do more than that. We just have to try and do our bit to make it so.
All right, over to Camilla.
So we really, of course, agree with the previous comments. And while reading really quickly this, we remind about Global Pact, that is a project created for the United Nations organization. And it's pretty similar because they have like 11 projects, and all the institutions, 17 projects, and all the institutions are able to commit themselves with one of those projects. So it's really interesting the way they do that.
Yeah, thank you. Just conscious of time. Come to Hadil next.
Yeah, I guess I'm just referring back to something that you said, Andy, earlier about this generation being more aware, and I think that was like mentioned earlier about at the beginning pages of the report, about how it's leadership, like in basically the increase of awareness, but then there's also sort of what you said again about COVID and how everything is sort of moving back. So it's kind of like there's an increase at one side, but then there's like also like a negative impact on the other side. And just like would be interesting to see, moving past COVID, hopefully, how things are gonna turn out.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Just conscious of time, we'd like to get you to a break shortly, but we've got a few more things to go through. Is there anything we haven't covered that either Katara or Gabriella you'd like to raise? Anything that we didn't sort of cover in any of those comments?
No, I think everybody pretty much covered it.
I think break would be nice.
Break would be nice, or we're going to make you work for the break. I'm sorry, we've got a few things to go through first. So just very quickly, if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, just wanted to give you a little bit of a challenge. I think this is a bit unfair because you've got Camilla and Sebastian working together on this one. So you've got 2 minds for the price of 1. So what I want you to do is literally just, you're going to have 2 minutes, is I want you to come up with, I've said 3, but don't worry if it's not, ideas for these 3 things you're about to see on your screen. Ready? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and then we're going to see what kind of ideas you could come up with. So it's a torn t-shirt, discarded coconut shells, and empty wine bottles. The person with the best idea also gets a new business idea as a prize. I think I've accidentally started an argument between Camilla and Sebastian. They've clearly got different ideas as to what they should be using these things for. All right, don't worry if you don't get 3 for each one. It's just a quick fun challenge. So you've got another 30 seconds and then we'll hear what everyone's had to say. All right, pens down. Let's hear what everyone's got. So in a random order, we'll start with Danny first.
I just took 2 bottles. They like using the wine bottles as a flower spot, so to put flowers in there. The cocoa shield. How do you say that? The
Coconut shell.
The coconut shell for making ecological glasses to take some drinks on it.
Ah, see, I thought you meant glasses.
No, sorry.
That would have been a brilliant idea. I don't know how big your face would have to be to have a pair of coconut shells on, but all right, thank you, Danny. Over to Abel next.
Okay. For the shirt, I thought you could have like like a themed kind of companies who do like fancy dress. Essentially, could take them up and sell them for like Halloween costumes as like zombies and stuff, and they could rework them. Then for the coconut shells, I thought a bra company could use them and rework them essentially into some kind of recycled, upcycled, clothes like that. And for the glasses, I thought they could be used for like selling to restaurants, that kind of motif when it's kind of that rustic kind of motif essentially that it's kind of going for now.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much. We'll go to Gabriella next.
So I only got an idea for the coconut shells. I figured there has to be some way to kind of break it down to maybe make like, essentially it has kind of like that wood texture. So you could be making like tables, furniture, chairs, household items.
Cool. Yeah, very nice. I like that idea. We'll go to Katara next.
Well, for the bottles, just refill them with non-alcoholic wine, so you save the brains as well. That would be the cheapest and easiest way to wash them and reuse them. You can also, use it as, because glass is silicon, glass is sand, so you can turn them back to sand and extract the silicon out of it and make micro whatever you want, microchips. And the third one I haven't thought about.
No, that's all right. So I think we've got some very good ones.
So the coconut shell, I think you can use it as floorboards. There's a lot of material that could be used in buildings. Also, it could be for cutlery and straws, recyclables. And the shirt, if the t-shirt, if it's cotton, you could use it for duvet fillers and pillow fillers, for example. You can recycle it for new clothing, and also soft toy filler. You can compost it or use it for gardening strings and things like that.
Fantastic. Thank you
But
very
also
much.
the cocoa shell could be used replacing those plastic buttons and ornaments that use for making clothes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Go to Krishna.
Yeah, where I'm from, India, it's a place called Kerala, and it's known for coconuts. So I can tell you 5, 6 from coconut shells. You can burn them as incense to repel mosquitoes. Yes, it's possible we do it. We can use it as utensils to cook rice dishes, steam it up. You can even use it as a steamer, inhale steam. You can serve it as a serving pot, like soup, food, alcohol. We can make wine out of coconut water. So we do that, and we can tie it to a rope and make it as a step to climb the coconut tree. And this is something that we do already. So just
Wow.
recounting. And for the yeah, it's fun. And for the bottles, I think one thing that I saw was they fill it up with light inside and fill it with water, and supposedly attract flies and trap it around there. So apparently it's used as a fly catcher. And yeah, the rest is pretty much the same as other people said. Thank you.
I feel like you had the unfair advantage on the coconut shells. So, all right, over to Camilla.
Okay.
Yeah, since they mentioned pretty much everything about the coconuts, we will just add like cereal bowls, roof tiles, and maybe flower pots. Very simple. About the lamps, we thought about the bottles, we thought to make them lamps, putting light bulbs inside, or to use them like bricks. We have seen like some people in the South, they put it in the walls, and it's a way of
To the light.
to saving electricity,
Yeah.
because they absorb the light. So
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Lauren and James, have you got any there that you'd like to add?
Yes.
Go for it, Lauren.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are really similar ideas. The coconut, I think that's probably got the best sort of the amount of things you can do with it. Obviously, Krishna's given us lots of ideas there, but just again, like pencils, stationery, knives and forks, that sort of thing. The bottles, again, I did have the idea of putting lights, so more of a decorative thing. Oh, can you hear me? My internet's going.
We can, yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. But also as candle holders, because a lot of people do that as well. And possibly with the t-shirts, some of the bits that are not torn, you could make into underwear, possibly. That was a little, addition.
But for my 2 pennies worth, the bottles, cut them off, sand down the sharp edges and use them as glasses. For the tops, turn them upside down, then put light bulbs in them and use them as a candelabra. For the coconuts, I thought initially about perhaps sticking string next door to them and using them as a telephone. But then I thought that was actually more like tin cans as opposed to coconuts. Some item of fashion clothing or knee protector, and for the rather ripped up top, I just think probably chop it up and repurpose it for another source, either stuffing something or whatever. But I think there's some things there that potentially could be used. Again, it depends, doesn't it, on the kind of the ability to be able to turn it into something without using more energy than you're actually saving.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting just how everyone's taken a sort of slightly different perspective to it, but I think there's some great ones. So these are the ones I came up with. You could cut the t-shirts up and use them as cleaning cloths. So, you see window cleaners using them, things like that. If you could cut off the salvageable bits, you could sew 2 t-shirts together, or you could also shred it and turn it into insulation. So we're seeing that quite a lot at the moment with plastic is being used and actually combined with concrete to make kind of new concrete structures. I think everyone sort of said this, and I think I think all of those were really covered. The wine bottles, I have seen people actually taking different bottles, literally just putting those kind of pump handle soap dispensers into them, and charging 15, 20 pounds for what was essentially an empty bottle. So, you know, it's all about how you look at something and can interpret it to kind of adapt to what your needs are. We were going to go into the next session, but I'm conscious of time. So I think this is probably a good opportunity to take a 10-minute break. So if I could ask everyone to come back for 25 past 2. So just time to stretch your legs, take a break, grab a drink. We'll start the next part in 10 minutes time. All right. And if you've got any questions, you know, pop them in the chat box. We'll address them when everyone comes back from their break. But thank you very much, everyone. I've really enjoyed that first part of the session, and hope you have as well. And we'll see you in 10 minutes time. All right. I tell you what we will do then is I'll hand over to James, who's going to talk you through the UN Sustainability Goals. And then we're going to move into a breakout activity again. So over to James.
Right. Okay. So my kind of guess is that you guys are already pretty aware of what the UN Sustainability Goals are, being the fact that you're sitting here and you're already involved. I came across them probably about 5 or 6 years ago when I was talking to a couple of local businesses, and we were generally discussing about how one can align yourself to something which is potentially ready-made and has a ready-made community and a ready-made element about understanding and sort of kind of bringing all of the bits together. And this person I was speaking to said, oh, what we do, and he was a local accountant, he said, what we do is we've joined a scheme, and it's basically buy one, give one. And this idea and this process of it was that every time they took on a new customer, they would then end up contributing through the buy one, give one mandate towards a sustainability goal of their choosing. And they would choose that particular sustainability goal, and that's where they were. So when you actually walked into his office, and it was, you'd walk up the stairs, and at the top of the stairs was this big board of UN sustainability goals. So I kind of thought, oh, that's very interesting, because I generally thought it was mostly big organizations and big businesses that were going to sit there and align themselves to this. But it actually opened up a whole kind of idea about for businesses to be able to connect to a pre-made goal that aligns with their values, that means something to them, and that can open up a great deal of if you like, opportunities to partner, to work together, to do lots of different things. And I think that was one of the challenges that that a lot of businesses face when they are small businesses, potentially on the journey towards growth, but they are still in the kind of the world and spectrum of a relatively small business. How do I make an impact? How do I actually do what I want to do in society, but magnify that process? And I think this is where the sustainability goals really do come into their fore for a lot of developing, growing businesses, because it is a place where you can magnify the impact of what you're doing. Yes, you can build your socially impactful business. Yes, you can do all of what you want to do within your socially impactful business. But actually, if you want to start to materially suggest to people that this is the impact that we are making, and I think this is, again, one of those areas of how do we record, say, sustainability? How do we record our output or what we're doing in terms of the impact on a specific goal? And there are measures of working with these organizations and working with these goals that would allow you to actually start to engage with some of those measures and some of those impacts, and make it certainly more slightly more meaningful, but also kind of give you that element of footprint and size. So I think that you know, from everybody's perspective, familiarizing yourself with them and aligning yourself to one or more, you know, inevitably if you're interested in impactful businesses, sustainability, ecology, ecological sustainability, or social impact, then pretty much every goal will mean something to you. But again, it goes back to how can I be selective? How can I magnify what I'm doing and get a result and a return on the basis of where it is? So the following are the 17 goals. They can be split up into those 3 areas: spiritual, ecological, and people. They cover pretty much the entire spectrum of what you would expect them to cover. I think the one for a lot of people that certainly confused me for a while was partnership for goals. And I think that the bottom line of that is how you build collaborations, how you build things and work together across different goals to actually create a bigger impact. So there are lots of organizations that potentially do that, and there are lots of organizations that have aligned themselves to them. Most of them are, like I said, relatively big, but again, it gives you that ability to be able to actually feature or fit your output into one or more of those particular boxes. And that, to me, just starts to get the conversations going, starts to get people thinking, and starts to get people talking. Do you want to go on to the next, Andy? So in more detail, these are them. I'm not going to read them out because it would be really sort of kind of tedious. But what I would say is that from my perspective, the one that I really am very focused on within the business, that what I do is decent work and economic growth, because I think that impacts everybody. And when I talk about economic growth, I don't talk about unsustainable economic growth. I talk about economic growth which has that element of sustainability about it, that we're increasing value through the things that we do in order that we can actually create opportunity within that environment for people, for young people, for older people, whatever we're doing. We're always looking, going back to that idea of reimagining people's skills, reimagining people's abilities, and repackaging them, remaking them into something that's right for them. Because life is one of these dynamic things that we tend to think of or tend not to notice when we become misaligned with our skills and our values to where we are. And actually, the reality of it is that we change in life, things happen. But ultimately, if we can create an environment where decent work, well-paid work, work that invests in the individual, work that has purpose, work that has meaning, that we will end up driving economic growth on the back of that. So that's been our goal, and one that we advertise that we're there. Clearly, all of the other goals, certainly from the point of view of gender equality, diversity, getting rid of inequalities and things like that, and sustainable cities, all of these things we're really, really interested in. But that's the one that we kind of focus on. Next slide. So some of the businesses out there that have been doing things in this is actually quite an old slide, and I've got to update it because there's more and more businesses, and there's some of these businesses are, they're mostly Americans or American style businesses, but you get a general gist out of all of them that these are the kinds of models that they're embedding within what they're doing. So when Danny was talking about how do I make something happen within my drone business, and how do I make that, if you think of what Lego do in terms of how they have a very commercial aspect to what they're about. I think the issue with Lego is that there is a lot of kind of unsustainable activity potentially that exists within Lego bricks and blocks. But at the end of it all, there is a level of purposefulness and a level of investment into creativity that they spend a lot of time sort of kind of nurturing and fostering. So that kind of stuff, again, this is where it's quite interesting, is where you've got a particular set of values that maybe are in conflict with another set of values. And it might well be that you would espouse a particular set of values, but not live another set of values. And I think this is probably where the sustainability goals kind of get a little bit kind of blurry, because some of those areas are, you can align yourself to a particular goal. And I'll give you an example. I used to work for a bank, and they aligned themselves to a clean water and sanitation goal. And they ended up funding and supporting a water sustainability project in I think it was sub-Saharan Africa, and they were literally there investing money in doing that. But then they actually, one of their biggest customers was a Brazilian bottling plant that used gallons and gallons and gallons of water to produce plastics. And kind of, you know, ultimately a gallon of water in a plastic container was actually ending up costing about 20 gallons of water to make. So you kind of, it was a real conflict between the two. So you've got to think, I always think you've got to think about these things from the perspective of what holistically are we doing within our businesses, and where do we fit, and what do we want to accentuate. But at the end of the day, what we're actually saying to people is well, you know, these are ethics. These are the way that we want to run our businesses. And ethically, you know, we don't just selectively tick the box and choose not to live by other ones. We collectively try to live, you know, or deliver as good a life in our business as we possibly can. So going on, those are the first 8. I think the next ones go on there. The reduced inequalities. You have to kind of say these goals were set back in 2000. Oh gosh, when were they set? 2012?
15.
With a view that they would be achieved in some measure by 2030. Now, obviously, 2030 is rapidly approaching, and you have to kind of say within that environment, there are certain goals which have become more aware, things like the oceans and what we're doing with plastics and stuff like that. They're becoming more aware. We're probably toying with the idea about consumption. We're probably toying about the idea of eliminating poverty, but the problem is that there is no green method to actually do any of that. So alleviating poverty is a great generalized global goal, but some people could say we will alleviate poverty by raising the rising tide of capitalism, and so basically it's a trickle-down economy. And there are other people out there that say no, that doesn't work. So it's no kind of consistent message that everything kind of works at a particular level. But in isolation, it is not wrong for any organization to say that we are helping to alleviate poverty, whether that's refugee poverty, whether that's, you know, social poverty, whether it's, you know, just children living below the threshold of what's deemed to be, you know, kind of safe for them and for their life. It's just committing ourselves to some aspect of these sustainability goals. So they're valuable, they're a talking point, they are something which at the end of the day opens up the ability to be able to actually do something challenging within your business and find other people who are doing something similar. So if you went out and searched for which businesses are looking at sustainable cities and communities, it would give you, if that was an area of your interest, it would give you a plethora of potentially organizations that might well be partners, may well be people that could open doors, extend networks, do that kind of thing. So yeah, that's that part. I think there's only one more goal, which is the 17th. Like I said, I found this one slightly more kind of confusing because it didn't automatically stand out, but I think it is about how we build those collaborative relationships to kind of foster and develop bigger impact through partnerships. Okay, so we're on to a challenge. Who's up for a challenge? Hello, who's up for a challenge? Good, we're up for a challenge. Excellent stuff. So we all know about the problems with laptop computers. We all know that basically they end up in some sort of kind of state of limbo or worse once the batteries run out, or the screens get cracked and it becomes a real issue to get them replaced, or economically it's cheaper to throw them out than it is to actually replace the things. But it's simply not good enough for us to sit still and not address or think about problems like this. So I think for us, we want to just do this particular challenge. What we'd like you to do is to design a poster. We're going to do this in a breakout session, Andy, are we? I think, yeah. So we're going to get you to kind of work out. So you've got the ability to be able to use a whiteboard on Zoom, if you know how to do that in terms of that, or you can use Canva and share your screens. I think we can set you up for doing that kind of thing. So or you can use a PowerPoint slide and do that. You've got 30 minutes on this particular thing. What we want you to do is we want you to design a poster to turn the life of that laptop into something which is more carbon neutral. So go back to what we've been talking about this morning. Think about maybe circularity arguments. Maybe we're thinking about changing that consumer behavior. Maybe there's something through governance that might address this particular issue. Just go through a kind of a discovery and a thinking process. Choose a particular aspect of this, and between you, if you could then just create a single slide PowerPoint presentation, something like that, that actually then sort of kind of acts as a poster that says, there's your laptop, this is our model for reduction or zero carbon neutral or whatever it is, to be able to actually make this particular product that much better. Does everybody understand the challenge? Good.
Is everyone ready for the challenge?
Yeah, they're raring.
That's a better question, isn't it? All right. So what I'm going to do is just going to. So if you want to come back into the room, then you can just click leave. If there's any questions, James and I will sort of come into the rooms and sort of see how you're doing as well. But hopefully this should work. So I'm going to open the rooms. All you need to do is you should just have to click kind of enter room. So there you go.
Yeah, I have. I'm just wondering, can I share my slides first? Okay. Right. So what we came up with was basically. Does anybody else wants to explain this?
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So so our idea was just totally stop production and start producing. So literally forget about what you're doing right now, forget it, stop. And then the production would be, we call it X-nut shells. It could be coconut shells, it could be walnut shells, any nuts. They all have got the characteristics to be used for hard material and lightweight, which could be used effectively in production of these kind of things. And we thought an offering to be of, for example, coconut shells. It's tough, waterproof, and durable. The keyboard could be also X-nut shells or bamboo or aluminium, something of natural produce or natural products or whatever you can find in the mineral world. Use more golds. At the moment, the gold is used literally in some areas, and because it's of the cost of gold, it is, people try not to use it because they want to produce cheap material, cheap laptops. And that should stop, should be stopped because, the gold that you use is not a lot because you use micrometers and micro thin gold. It's not going to be costing a lot. So do use that. Thin film technology for, again, use a motherboard as X-nuts and then paste some resistors on it, which are thin film, which could be effectively used where possible. And also, in terms of services and policies, obviously governments should be looking more carefully about who they tax and put an effective tax regime in place to encourage new incomers to who are thinking about sustainable designs, and also the consumers. Make it cool so new generations can be educated on that. And for every sustainable purchase, donate existing models. So low resources children for education can be used.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Any questions, comments, or other about either of the presentations?
Why do you think nobody's actually ever made a computer laptop out of recycled nuts?
Well, the nuts have come recently into the market. You know, if you were to ask Ford about his, you know, he's got a special, I can't remember his exact word, but he said that if he'd ask his consumers, they would say, you know, get a part of the horse. But I think if you ask today, they would say, you know, give us a Focus or a Fiesta which is sustainable, for goodness sake. Give us something that's electric. You know, they wouldn't say that faster. They would say this. You know, and I think nut shells and coconut and all this bamboo and everything, it's not been quite, you know, it's a new thing, so people have not thought about it. But also governments are not encouraging it, and people have no money. The economy of the world is based on greed, as was said before. It's not based on ethical and spiritual values.
Right. Okay, cool, brilliant, thank you very much indeed.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to take another short break. So 10 minutes, so we could be back for just about 20 past. We'll move into the next section of the afternoon and the presentation. So thank you very much for everyone for getting involved in that last task. Hope you enjoyed thinking about something a little bit different. And with that theme, we're going to start thinking even more differently. Some might say weirder, you know, after the 10-minute break. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes time. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, I'll tell you what, we'll get underway because I'm sure Hidil won't be far behind. So we wanted to talk a little bit about sustainability, get you understanding that some of those concepts. So we also recognise that certainly listening to some of the ideas you've spoken about earlier today, a huge part of this links to your personal values. So we're going to do a value discovery exercise as part of this next session, and we're also going to look at how we potentially move your values into interests, and those interests and values into a potential business. So similar, if you've done the Startup Weekender, you may kind of recognize some of the kind of things we talk about, but there's also a few differences in the way that we're going to kind of cover this aspect as well. And I don't think it really matters. So often there's sometimes a confusion around whether or not you're starting a business, whether or not you're starting a charity, whether or not it's a freelance or you're a sole trader, whether or not you're going to start a social enterprise. I think actually, although I put this slide together for this particular workshop, I think it kind of rings true about everything. And there's a slide that comes up in a little while. And for me, it's about looking at what the change is in the future and understanding how to get there faster with a better solution than what currently exists. And I think listening to some of your ideas, it certainly sounds as though those are the expectations that you're hoping to kind of achieve as well. You're looking at change maybe being too slow or going in the wrong direction, or maybe not serving different communities in the world. And actually, it sounds as though these are some of the things you want to tackle. And it's about having that vision. And it's about actually kind of attacking this in a slightly different way. So typically, I think it was Einstein said, you know, we can't solve the problems of today with today's way of thinking. I always get that wrong. But it's this kind of mentality, you know, all the ideas that we've heard are not the same old ways of thinking. Everything you've spoken about is very much a case of sort of saying, how do we challenge the status quo? How do we look at what is happening, and how do we affect the change in what we want to happen? And this does link to problem solving. It does link to kind of idea generation. So if you took part in that that Startup Weekender back at the end of October, it's very much this approach. How are you looking what's happening in the world and trying to change and kind of affect a change in direction? Sometimes we kind of talk about changing the narrative. How do you change the story around what's happening, and how do you actually empower yourselves as maybe business owners or business owners around you to also pay attention? And I think when we're looking at social enterprises or charities, anything like that, we're looking to address two specific things. One are the problems we're facing right now, and the others that we recognize we'll see in the future. And I think it's when we're looking to address these, it's about understanding how you build sustainability into your business, not just in terms of what we've spoken about in terms of maybe environmental, but what we're looking to do is actually build longevity into your business. So if you're trying to solve a problem right now, you also need to be looking to the future, because again, how do we iterate your business? How do we build in that phase 2 to make sure that actually if you're solving a problem right now, once that problem disappears, or if it was to actually be that you're successful in how you tackle or address that challenge, what do you move on to next? So you don't just kind of reach an endpoint and don't know where to go. So I think there's kind of almost like bite-sized pieces. I think a lot of the time it comes down to solving much bigger challenges. And I think when we're talking about solving challenges, we're looking at how we need to take a social problem solving approach or process to it. And this is something I learned from someone who basically runs workshops for businesses, how you innovate over time. And the reason I thought it'd be useful to talk about it is because, again, talking about social enterprises it's an innovative way of looking at how a business can operate, but with a very different purpose. It's not about capitalism. It's very much a change of the way that you're thinking. So the world is kind of a product of change over time. And it opens up opportunities of what could be possible if we moved at the fastest speed that we could. And this is what the green line is. So if we moved as fast as we could, we would typically move through this process. We'd actually achieve change a lot quicker. But we're often a lot slower. So although this is what could be possible, we often actually move more like this. And it's because this is how we tend to move. And the reason we do that is because where I've just kind of got this little red loop coming back is because when we get to an inflection point, when we're looking at how we make change, if you imagine where this point starts and works its way backwards, it's almost that we have to look backwards before we can move forwards. So we have to look at what has happened in order to maybe try and guess or preempt what might be. And that process can be quite slow. Because once you do that, you then have to kind of look forward. So this is where the orange kind of loop comes forward and kind of say, right, so this is what we've looked at what's happened before, and now we're looking to what we do in order to change these things. And that's why change over time can be quite slow, is because we're not moving at the speed. We're often kind of looking at what's happened and we're kind of constrained by that. And I think the question sort of came up just before this is, why has a laptop never been made out of these materials? I think it's right, because we've never thought of it. We've never thought that it's possible. We never thought it's been achievable. No one's ever been brave enough to actually dare to try and make a laptop out of X nuts, as I think kind of you refer to them. So why is that? And a lot of the time it's because we're stuck. So we're stuck in this world of what is. So we only know what we can see around us. And all of this means that we only ever look to slowly improve. So we do continuous improvement. And this is where I think social enterprises are moving forward at a slightly different pace, because they're not saying, oh, we just want to do really small things over time. They're actually saying we want to, tackle and address these big UN sustainability goals. And I think through that, this is where you kind of get these new ideal or these innovative businesses coming through. Even the ones, when you look at them, as simple as taking fishing nets out of the sea and recycling them to turn them into sunglasses or into bracelets or, things like that. They're actually saying, well, what could be possible if we kind of sped up this whole process? And what we're trying to do is move between this lower bit at the bottom, which is how we tend to move, and kind of speed all of that up. And I think it's doing workshops like this. I think it's spending time listening to other people talk that really helps you to move at a quicker pace. And sometimes there's those mental barriers in place, those blockers which stop you from doing that. And the one thing I sort of say is that, I hate to say it, it's a shameless plug, but that's what the Startups team are here to do. We're here to kind of help you to overcome those blockers. Because what we want you to do is see what is possible when you're trying to solve those problems. It might be that sometimes it's that a technology doesn't exist or you don't know how to access it. But it might be that you're just stuck in the way of knowing what's actually kind of happening in the world around you. You need to think beyond that. You need to go beyond that scope. So whether or not it's attending these sessions, whether or not it's reading articles on LinkedIn, going and listening to people on YouTube, continuing to explore ways of learning, new pieces of information help you to do that. And I think this is where it all ties into sort of that social innovation and that kind of collective problem solving approach. And the difference is very much for I think the way that businesses have been, it's a little bit like this. You're kind of sat on Earth and you're looking at the moon. And I think this is kind of how previously, up until we started to see real change in terms of these social enterprises, this is what it's like. But for the businesses who I think kind of take that step and they look to go beyond and they look to kind of break out of the conventional way of thinking, I think this is the view that they have. I think this is about changing your perspective on the world. Do you want to be looking up at the moon, wondering how you get there? Or do you want to be looking back at Earth and saying, that's where I used to be, but I'm much happier where I am now? And I think that's the message for social enterprises. And I think that's the difference as well between a business that may kind of dip in to a social responsibility aspect, but never truly commit to it. I think they'll always be stuck on Earth. And I think the ones that really truly commit to it and make it a pure purpose and a focus of what they're trying to achieve are the ones that actually reach that next level. So with those businesses, it's clear that their purpose is key to what they do, and that purpose helps them to reach those levels. So I wanted to ask you a question. This is something that James posed. It was kind of around, is a company that makes beer who plants a tree a purposeful company? So if you've ever attended any of the events, you may have heard Ecosia before. So they're a search engine similar to Google, but a bit like on Google, companies pay to advertise. And on Ecosia, what they do is they take those advertising fees, and once they've covered the cost of their staff, their premises, everything else, they pay to plant trees in remote areas where they're looking to maybe replenish the rainforest, or if they're looking to help communities in sort of sub-Saharan Africa, and actually create opportunities for those communities to sort of survive by planting sort of greenery that actually helps them to sustain their kind of lifestyle there. So that's what Ecosia do. Brewdog are a beer company, and they do not exactly the same thing, but they also plant trees when people buy bottles of beer. So I want to ask everyone here, so please unmute yourself and let me know, which of these organizations is more purposeful? Anyone want to? I'll tell you what, I'm going to kick off by asking James on his thoughts.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that clearly Ecosia kind of tick a lot more boxes because their ultimate aim is this transition, this support for the ecosystem that they are working towards. So with that, you kind of think that there is a purpose. Brewdog, it kind of resonates more as a marketing ploy, more as something which is more strategic or tactical within what they're doing. So even though that actually Brewdog may plant more trees than Ecosia, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it from the position of a kind of a moral high ground. They're doing it from potentially establishing a marketing sort of differential between themselves. Now, you could argue that that's ultimately what a lot of social businesses, social impact businesses end up doing, is using the social footprints, the CSR, the corporate social responsibility to deliver that. So there is an element of, for me, yes, I mean, clearly for me, Ecosia is probably the more purposeful, but the impact could well be through Brewdog because they're doing more in terms of actual numbers that they're working towards. But again, I think you probably have to go back to ask why an organization like Brewdog would want to do it anyway. There may be some underlying additional value that they're adding to it.
So, all right, thank you, James. Over to the floor. So would anyone like to come in with any thoughts around which one? Yeah, we'll go to Abel first and then Gabriella.
I think Brewdog actually, because I think I watched like a little documentary in regards to them, because they actually have been incorporating a lot more processes into how they even process the wheat and barley, and have and been investing in keeping it local as well. And whereas to me, Escoa, they seem it's depersonalized. The kind of contributions are very, I mean, based off the information you gave, they both do the same thing essentially, but but to me, that kind of will plant trees is something that most companies do in regards to kind of just greenwashing and saying that there's not more of insightful opinion to the actual communities they're helping in a very direct way. Actually, you said there was, but yeah, that's mine.
All right, thank you, Abel. Gabriella.
I was just gonna say, I think, I mean, even just looking at the actual logos themselves, I mean, it kind of goes back to what James was saying, like, I mean, it shows the purpose in the logo essentially. So, I mean, I would think that Ecosia has a more, I guess it's more embedded in their values, but then going back to what Abel said, I mean, I haven't really done that much research on BrewDog to see what their underlying missions and values are.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else got anything that they'd like to add?
Yeah, yes. I think, digital platform and the mobile penetration is like really shooting through the roof. So I think per person transaction and the growth would be on Ecosia if you look at sector. And not everyone would want to drink or the per unit number. So number wise, I think, and scale wise, Ecosia is what I would want to associate with. And it's more like, I mean, it's not restricted to a place. So, and it's information and entertainment, anything goes there. So I would like to, skew toward that side aside. Yeah. And then, promoting drinking.
Very true. So only certain customer segments would actually be interested in Ecosia's approach to what they do versus BrewDog. Katara. And then we'll come to you, Hadil.
I think the answer would be either or, neither nor, depends. Because the question is, am I doing this because I am ethical, or am I doing this because I am ticking the box that says I need to be ethical in the corrupt society, in the corrupt system? For example, I know that Enterprise, for example, the company I work with, they have planted millions of trees. Okay? But the question is that when you go and work with them, they work with other companies such as MotoClean and other companies that actually wash their cars and deliver their cars. These companies use gloves to wash, and the gloves, of course, is not recycled. And they don't care. Enterprise doesn't look at that. But they do look at the actual, at the front face. Oh, we are making lots of trees, we're growing. But that's not, a lot of majority of companies are actually doing it because of the peer pressure. They're not doing it because it is ethical. And that is the problem.
So do you think people can see through that veil of falseness as well? Do you think that's becoming more apparent?
Absolutely. I mean, I attended quite a few years ago. There are a couple of women who were, through the system when they had children, they stopped working and then they couldn't get working. And I actually heard this from the CEO's mouth. So, and she was saying, her name was Katrina, and she said, look, she's a woman returners, CEO, and she said, look, I started looking for work and I couldn't find anything. And my gathering of the whole story was this, that because she couldn't find anything, and then they got together with her friend or somebody she found this company called Women Returners. And ethically, it was a good thing. The original idea was excellent because they were trying to help other women and then through that also get a job, right? But then imagine this beautiful formula going into the corrupt system. I attended one of their events. It was truly a marketing activity for the company. It was nothing to do with women or returning women to work. It was to do with that company, the bank, who wanted to do some activities and marketing themselves to say, oh, we are very good, we are looking after women, and we are doing these events and tick their box. You see this, how I say either or, neither nor. Because,
yeah. So it was more about the perception that they were doing the right thing rather than incorporating the right behaviors.
So I would take a magnifying glass and look at them carefully. I'll watch them.
Well, I think you can you can probably take a little bit more time after this afternoon. There is one piece of information I haven't given you yet, and I'm going to wait until her deal, and if Camilla wants to come in, I'm going to share that one piece of information and see if that changes anyone's minds.
I was gonna talk about purposefulness in terms of like employment opportunities as well, and if either of them, like I'm not, again, I don't know much about BrewDog, but is that for something that sort of was introduced when the company was already established, or if that came in later? So if, or for instance, if Ecosia had the idea of like, okay, we can make available more employment opportunities just by making this available, although like it's not necessary. Like I tried using it after you mentioned it before, and to be honest, it's not the best in terms of like search results. But so the point is, there's already like things that are already established that can be used, like Google search, like everyone's pretty much using that. But also, is it like, was it part of the plan at the beginning that they are not only doing this because they want to plant more trees, but they also want to make opportunities available for people who would work with them?
Yeah. So Google as a whole may actually do more good for the planet because their size allows them to do that. But imagine Ecosia grew to the size of Google and their core values started from day one, whereas Google probably established themselves over time and then looked to reach out. Would you then not see that they're trying to maybe potentially subvert your attention away from the fact they only did it late rather to the fact that they're doing it, whereas Ecosia would be able to say from day one, this has always been something that we've looked to achieve. So if they grew to the size of Google, then suddenly actually as a company, are they more reputable? I suppose it's this, I've just rephrased that question again. So would Google doing more be more purposeful than Ecosia, who started out with this intention in the first instance?
I believe intentions matter.
Yeah.
Regardless, like you said that the impact of BrewDog, or someone said that it's maybe possibly even more than the other one because they're planting more trees. But again, the intention, I think, is important.
Yeah. All right, and I'm going to come to Camilla and Sebastian as well, just last, to see if you've got anything else you'd like to add. You don't have to if we think it's all been covered, or if there's anything.
Yes, we do believe pretty much everything has been covered. Just something to add that, yeah, since it seems like Ecosia was born with this concept of helping, and it seems like BrewDog was like in the middle of the way. At the end, both of them are contributing. So that's why, even if it was the main idea or it comes at
marketing
halfway,
strategy,
they both are helping.
Yeah, so the thing with BrewDog is, again, a bit like what was mentioned, actually, they started as a really small craft brewing company, and then they went very big very quickly. They were very successful. They got into some big supermarkets. They got some good opportunities. They actually allowed their customers to become shareholders and actually raise a lot of money that way. So BrewDog, you know, we talk about planting trees as the example. By 2025, we'll have planted enough trees to make all of their operations net carbon zero. So they will actually be putting more oxygen into the atmosphere than the carbon dioxide they create through all of their beer brewing processes. But again, they came to that quite late. And you look at the two on the face of it. But it's also about how companies try to address some of these things. And BrewDog have a prime example of how they try to address gender inequality, and it went horribly wrong. So they do something called Punk IPA. It's kind of their really famous one. It was the first beer that they started. It's the one that essentially helped them become really quite major. A few years ago, they launched something called Pink IPA. So this was to address the gender inequality when it comes to pay. So Pink IPA cost 20% less than Punk IPA, because that is the pay difference at senior levels and in most jobs between males and females who are doing the equivalent roles. So they tried to launch that and it failed miserably because it was being seen to exploit the gender pay gap for commercial purposes. And there's a really interesting blog. I'll see if I can find it and share it with you all before. It's actually about the 10 mistakes they've made as a company over time. So when it comes to purposeful, I think there's two things. I think there's intent and I think there's hope. Do you intend to be more purposeful or do you hope to be more purposeful? Is it a core aspect of what you're going to do? Or is it that kind of bit on the side that actually for public perception, public relations, we should be seen to be doing more of this type of thing? It's interesting again with BrewDog, you know, one of the guys who founded it's come out and he's written a blog about the 10 things they've got wrong. And again, it comes back to maybe locality. So one of the things they did was they bought a cider company in London and then shut it down, essentially moved all of the production somewhere else. And it was seen that they'd lost that aspect of the company that they bought, which had become really popular. So I'll share that with you just so you get an example of seeing how big companies can get good intentions wrong. It's quite a useful blog to actually read on that front. So just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on that. So when it comes to purpose, a lot of these are driven from your own personal values. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into a value discovery exercise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 5 slides. So you're going to need a pen and piece of paper. I'm going to ask you just to pick 5 words from each slide. So you'll have 25 words at the end. And then we're going to put all the similar words together. And I'm going to ask you to pick 1 word from each group. And I think we're at an interesting point because some of you have already got ideas around what you might be looking to explore within your business. We'll move on to the next part and you can either use the current idea that you have or you can come up with something new. So I'm going to give you a minute to look at each slide and then I'm going to move on. So you've got to pick 5 words that you identify with from each of these lists. Hopefully everyone's got 5 words. So I'm going to move on to the next slide now. If you get torn between 2 words, ask yourself, if I could only choose one, which is the first one I would choose? All right, slide number 3. Slide number 4. And slide number 5. Okay, so hopefully you should have about 25 words. If you don't have that number, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry. So you should have kind of tried to pick 5 words from each slide, but if you've got less, it's not a problem. So now what I want you to do is group them together. So if you saw similar words or words that kind of have a similar meaning, try and group them together. Then what I want you to do, once you've done that, so an example of that might be if you chose the word creativity and playfulness, those two you would group together. So think about the words you've chosen and try and draw all of them together where there are similar themes that run through those groups of words. So you may have just 2 or 3 groups, or you may have 5 or 6, depending on the words that you chose. Once you've grouped the words together, I want you to choose one word from each group. So the most important word to you. So once you've circled those words now, I want you to write down 2 things that you enjoy doing. So these may be hobbies, they could be sports, they could be interests. So it could be, I don't know, rock climbing and reading, or surfing and sewing. Think of just 2 activities that you enjoy doing. So hopefully what you have now will be about 5 words or values that you've identified and 2 activities that you enjoy doing. And hopefully, if you've chosen kind of the words that you're true to, they should actually link to the types of activities that you've chosen as well, but not necessarily. So next up, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to try and I'll ask you to think of a business idea that is either going to tackle a UN sustainability goal, or it's going to look at developing an ethical or sustainable product that you could create. So it should be linked to your values, it should be linked to the activities that you enjoy doing, and it should either help to address one of the UN sustainability goals, or it should help, or there should be a product that you may be able to create with an ethical or sustainable focus. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to remind you of the sustainability goals. So have a look there, think if there's any that what you've come up with naturally fit into one of those. It's okay if they don't. The alternative is an ethical or sustainable product, or let's look at it in kind of the wording we've used already, the circular economy, a sustainable product. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. And I want you to discuss your ideas as a group with each other. And then we're going to ask you just to report back, and just really quickly, just going to ask everyone to give us an example of the idea that they came up with. And this is just a really short exercise. So don't worry about sort of details around what you would actually do. We just want a really quick, snappy intro. But I want you to discuss and ask questions of each other's ideas and where they've come from. And And share the values that you've chosen as well. Ask each other why they chose the words that they've chosen. Try and understand kind of the people you're in that breakout room with a little bit more, so you can see where their ideas come from. Doesn't matter if it's a good idea, doesn't matter if it's a bad idea. We're not worried about that right now. It's just trying to get you into that frame of mind of thinking, what could be possible if you were to start a business based on your values and your interests that link to the topics we've covered today. All right, does that make sense? Everyone okay? What we'll do is we'll open the breakout rooms and we'll just send you back into the same groups you were in previously. All right, so let me just see. Yep, you've got 20 minutes. All right, so I'll come in and check how you're getting on in the next 5 minutes or so, but the rooms are now open for you to join. We'll see you in a little while. Thank you, everyone.